pulled for whatever reason. Turn with me to Exhibit 8, please. That's Exhibit 8. I think
Oh,
that's
one more?
Yeah, one more.
I don't have a 9. First one.
There's a couple that are blank in here. I try to save some paper around here. Do you recognize these, Jeff?
I don't.
I'll represent to you, to the best of my knowledge, the parcel number identified in the upper left-hand column is the parcel that we're talking about today. And this is talking about a tax sale year of 2005. The next page is 2006.
I'm not seeing where you're saying tax sale.
Oh, upper left-hand corner.
Okay, got
See
it.
that?
Got it.
Says 2005, next page is 2006, 2 pages later, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010. You said that you were aware of a possible tax sale of this property. I think you said a couple times. Do you recall what years those were?
I don't. Probably in the late 2008, 2009. I think these happened in the spring, if I recall.
How were you made aware of those tax sales?
I have one person on my staff that kind of watches for them, and then we've also had Snow Christensen and Martineau watching for them.
Is there a practice of attending the actual tax sale that Salt Lake County hosts?
Sometimes.
When you say sometimes, what would determine whether you go or not go?
If we have a parcel we're going to try and acquire.
Okay. So as to this parcel, did Salt Lake City show up at any of the tax sales you were made aware of?
My recollection is that they were pulled so that they weren't actually at the physical tax sale. So they were teed up and then pulled off the list before the event occurred.
Is that something you learned while you were at the tax sale that it was pulled, or you found out beforehand?
I think beforehand.
Right. Do you know why they were pulled from the tax sale?
I don't.
Do you know who would know?
I don't. Probably the county assessor. But
Did the county assessor ever communicate with your staff about things like, gee, we'd really like to get this one on the chopping block, let's have a sale?
no.
Was Salt Lake City willing to come and pay the property taxes owing at this time?
We would, yes.
What did Salt Lake City think was the status of the property in, say, 2008 related to ownership?
We didn't think, we didn't have an opinion until we did more research later on.
And you didn't do the research later on until 2009 when the listing was filed?
Correct.
Okay. I better mark that one.
That's number 8.
8.
When was the first time you were made aware of contact being made with the directors of the Colonia Mining One by Salt Lake City? You said Grant Shetler, but he's, I guess, not a director. But.
Right. Well, I don't know what Grant Schindler was or wasn't. I think in 2010, 11 timeframe is when Scott Martin was staff on Snow Christensen and Martineau were seeking information relative to shareholders and or directors. And that's when they probably made the initial contacts.
Turn with me to Exhibit 18. It's going to be our longest discussion. Actually. On the first page of Exhibit 18, is that your...
You gonna mark it?
I will, yeah, I will.
Okay.
I just want to ask, is that your signature there?
Yep, it's my chicken scratching.
Okay. All right, if you could turn to the second to last page of this exhibit. I hope we're looking at the same thing.
Page it says Jeff Niermeyer, Deposition 44.
I guess our binders don't match. Let me get that. Yes, that's the one. Okay, do you recognize this?
Yeah, it appears to be an invoice from Snow Christian Martineau.
All right, and you see the matter name is Colonia Mining Co., comma, Wayne Crawford. Do you see that?
I do,
And the invoice date is February 25th, 2010.
that's correct.
You see one of the first entries there is from a Wharf D on November 4th, 2009. Do you recall what was going on or about November and December of 2009 related to Colonia Mining Company?
I don't.
You testified earlier that in 2009 is when you saw a copy of a listing agreement for the property and it caught your staff's attention.
Right. But exactly what Ms. Worf was doing, I don't know.
All right. I want to understand, I guess, the most simple question is if Salt Lake City was trying to acquire this property from Colonia Mining Company, and you knew as early as 2009 about Wayne Crawford being involved with this property, why are we here 5 years later trying to acquire the property? Why didn't it happen before the lawsuit happened?
Because we were working at the time trying to identify shareholders and directors, working to come up with a legal way of acquiring the property, either through a tax sale, and even a tax sale doesn't acquire all the property, it's just a proportionate interest in it. And then trying to identify shareholders and or directors to work with. So it was a multi-pronged strategy.
And I believe you said you were unsuccessful at identifying any shareholders, is that right?
To this point, correct.
All right. What did Salt Lake City do when it discovered it could not find a shareholder?
I think, again, we hired a competent law firm and they went out and they did research and tried to come up with the directors of the company.
So between November 2009, which is the first entry I have in my record anyway related to this property, and August 2014, so about a 5-year span, can you identify for me all of the meetings that were had with the directors of Colonia Mining 1?
I can't. It was done through our outside legal counsel.
Was there ever one live meeting that you're aware of?
You know, after the lawsuit, I know there was a meeting. I know there was a lot of emails and telephone calls
Prior to that time?
prior to that.
Okay. So is the answer to my question then no, you were not aware of any live meetings prior to the time the lawsuit was filed?
I'm not aware of any live meetings.
turn the page to Jeff Niermeyer, Deposition 45. There's a charge there on January 26th of 2010. Professional services pay to the water title guy, water right research. Do you recall what that was for?
I don't.
Have you ever hired the water title guy before?
We use him often,
All right, for what purpose?
looking at ownership issues, looking at title issues relative. He's particularly good in tracing interests in mining claims.
Is he an attorney?
I don't believe he is.
Okay. This isn't a trick question here. I'm just trying to get at, are there water title issues implicated with the Colonia Mining Company, Wayne Crawford matter?
No, I don't know if we had him looking at water, if we had him looking at the chain of title of the mineral claims. That just happens to be his name.
Okay. We can look at invoices if you go back to Jeff Niermeyer, Deposition 40. These invoices continue from November 2009. Exhibit 40 shows us through March 31st of 2010. 39 shows us through April 2010. And I believe they go throughout 2010. And we can go through each one if we want to, but is it fair to say that there was a fair amount of work done on the Colonia Mining Company, Wayne Crawford issue through the year of 2010?
Again, there was. I think that's where they're, again, trying to research shareholders and or directors.
Cole, I'm not understanding. You represent there were bills through 2010. I'm not seeing that.
We can go through them all. I was just asked, my question was, is it fair to say that there were legal undertakings during the entire year of 2010 relative to the Colonia Mining and Wayne Crawford issue?
You're asking if he recalls it.
Yes, and he says yes. I'm happy to go through them in more detail. Just trying to save time here for everybody.
But there's, March and June. So
Yeah, I see.
relative to legal bills, they're not particularly indicating a lot of time was being spent, but there was time being spent.
I guess that's all relative,
Yep.
depending on who you ask.
But let me ask you a question here. You've represented that these bills go throughout 2010. I'm not seeing bills beyond June 30, 2010.
No, I haven't represented that. I have bills, I believe, for January, February, March, April, May, and June of 2010. I believe there's a gap there,
Okay.
and we pick up again in 2011. Is it fair to say that Salt Lake City continued its legal work on this subject property through 2011?
There was activity that did go on in 2011 through Snow Christian Martineau.
What was being investigated during 2009, 10, 11, 12, and 13 relative to Wayne Crawford himself? Or were we just looking at trying to find directors for Colonia?
We're trying to find directors. We recognized early on that we didn't believe Wayne Crawford or his alter egos was the legitimate owners of this property. So we were trying to find who they were.
Is it safe to say that as early as 2009, Salt Lake City was aware that Wayne Crawford was trying to possess this property?
No, I don't think that became clear until you guys filed the lawsuit to adverse possess it.
So what did you think Wayne Crawford was up to?
No good. I think he was, creating these wild deeds with the attempt somehow to confuse the public record
To what end?
to his personal profit gain.
Would that gain be to own the property?
I think Yeah, he would be trying to convince people that somehow he owned the property through these wild deeds.
And you were made aware shortly after 2009 when you discovered the listing agreement, you went back to the chain of title and discovered the deeds that had been filed, correct?
Correct.
And you saw the Colonia 2 deed, correct?
Yeah, with Colonia 2 deed to Cardiff Canyons LLC.
And you were made aware that Wayne was involved in some capacity for both of those companies, correct?
Right. So just look up on the commerce records, you can see who is involved in the companies.
Mm-hmm. Did you think this is something that Wayne Crawford was trying to hide?
I do,
Why?
because this is, we've seen this once before with Wayne Crawford, where he tried to pretend that he was a irrigation company, Farr and Harper, and filed water rights. So this is a standard mode of operation for Wayne Crawford.
Okay. But you were able to ascertain that he was involved in some capacity with Colonia 2 and Cardiff Canyon LLC simply by looking on a public record of the Utah Division of Corporations, right?
Yes.
There wasn't any other investigation necessary.
No.
So when I asked you the question that he was trying to hide these actions, in what way was he trying to hide it? What actions, I'll rephrase that, what actions did he take to hide this activity?
Well, somewhere in there, they went down basically to the county tax assessor and basically directed the tax notice to go to him. So I think he had this thought out plan on how he would confuse the record and basically get the enough chain of record out there that people wouldn't question whether or not he actually was the legitimate owner.
Was there ever an objection made on Salt Lake City's part to Wayne Crawford when they discovered what he was doing?
No. Turn it over to the county attorney's office.
Okay. But the county attorney's office nor Salt Lake City ever picked up the phone and called Wayne up and said, "What are you doing, pal?"
No.
Why not?
Well, why would we?
Well, I have my own reasons, but I don't want to answer that. Maybe you answered this one, so I might get an objection from Sean, but did you ever meet with any of the directors personally prior to the time the lawsuit started?
I have not.
Do you believe that the directors have the authority to sell the land?
I do.
What's the basis for that?
Yes, I hired a smart legal team, and they said that basically directors can unwind companies. We've done similar action on Little Cottonwood Water Company, where we had to have the old president sign a deed after the company had been wound down, so it's not an uncommon legal way of unwinding a company.
Do you disagree with me that the subject property is substantially all of the assets of the Colonia Mining Company 1?
They're the only assets that I'm aware of.
Okay. So based upon that, do you believe that shareholder approval is necessary?
No, I believe that the directors have the ability within their role as directors to work on the sale of the property, and then they have an obligation to put those funds available to the benefit of those shareholders if they could be found. But if they can't find shareholders, I'm not sure that they have an obligation.
Okay. Turn with me to Exhibit 2, please. Do you recognize this?
I don't, other than the title.
Okay. Oops. Turn with me to Bates number 6 of this exhibit.
I'm sorry. Let me get back there for you.
Article 10 reads, "To be eligible to the offices of this corporation, a person must be the owner of at least one share of the capital stock of the same." Do you have any reason to believe that the directors, Lois Fowles, George Mosman, and John Gidney, are owners of any capital stock of this company?
I don't know if they are or aren't.
All right. If I represent you that they are not, or if I represent you that they told me last Friday that they are not shareholders, would that change your opinion on whether or not these directors actually have authority to act for this company?
No,
Why not?
because essentially they were the listed directors of the company at the time it was dissolved, and they had the ability to act on the company.
All right. What efforts have been made to find shareholders since the time this lawsuit started? By you or the directors or anybody you're aware of?
I'm not sure we've been focusing on responding to the lawsuit.
Okay. I'm told that we have just a few minutes left on the tape, so I think now's a good time to break.
Works for me.
So we'll go off the record. We're off the record. There's a restroom down to the left-hand side if anybody needs it.